In this video, I'm going to talk about when you do and don't need categories inside of a Moodle gradebook. Categories are, in general, an opportunity to assign some additional information to a group of items that live inside your gradebook. However, they can just be standalone. It's not uncommon for me to see faculty who have, rather than creating grade items, add a grade item, have instead said add category. And so they have categories with nothing inside of them. Now, that's generally okay. You can still enter a grade into that category total. It just kind of fluffs up the gradebook a little bit, makes it a little bit bigger than it needs to be. So the point of this video is to kind of talk about when you might or might not actually need a category. So if your gradebook consists of only a handful of items, let's say 3 exams and 2 papers, you don't really need categories in that case. You could just create a column in your gradebook, so that's called a grade item, for each of those 5 items, and then that's fine. If you have a lot of items, sometimes categories can be helpful just to help your students and yourself be able to sort of visualize, here are all the grades of this type, here are all the grades of that type. So that's one reason to use categories, is just to help better organize all your materials, all your grades, so that all the columns of a certain type are in the same place inside the gradebook. Another reason to use categories is if you would like to drop a grade. So here I've got a category, so I did add category, and created this category, and inside of it I have 5 quizzes. But let's say I've decided that I want those quizzes, I want to drop one of those. They only have to count 1. Again, I'll come back here to edit and edit settings to get back into here, and I'm going to expand everything out, including that show more. If you don't click that show more, you don't see this, and this is important. Here's where we can drop the lowest or keep the highest. Now, why would it matter? Generally speaking, drop the lowest is best. Well, actually, they both can work like this. If you don't know how many, let's say, quizzes you're going to end up giving, you're pretty certain you're going to give 7, and you want to only count 5. You could say drop the lowest 2. But what happens if you didn't quite hit 7? What if you hit 6 and then you've still got, then it's only down to 4 quizzes. So in that case, it would make a lot of sense to say keep the highest 5, and then it doesn't matter if you ended up with 6 or 7 quizzes. Either way, it's going to count 5. On the other hand, maybe your point in doing this is that one bad grade can be dropped no matter what. And in that case, going with the drop the lowest makes the most sense, because it doesn't in the end matter how many quizzes you had, whether you had a set number, whether you had as many as you intended or not, because your goal is to give them 1 freebie. So just going ahead and say dropping the lowest 1 makes the most sense there. If you've chosen to drop the lowest, then the gradebook itself will make it appear as if there's no grades in this category until they've had more than, in this case, 1. So after the first quiz, that category total will still be empty because it has dropped the first quiz. At that moment, it's the lowest grade. They've taken 2 quizzes, it will only reflect the highest of the 2 because it has dropped 1, and so forth. So it's important that students know that Moodle is actively calculating this, as they go. Another approach is to not set it to drop the lowest until the end of the semester when you're wanting to grade calculate. Otherwise, just letting students know for themselves, okay, I see that I've taken 5 quizzes. I know that one of them is going to get dropped. The lowest one is going to get dropped, so I'll just kind of do that math in my head. And I wouldn't say necessarily wait till the end of the semester, but till the end of whatever that item is. So once they've taken the 5th quiz, then going in and changing this setting to drop the lowest at that point. So that up until then, they're having to really think about their quiz grades, and Moodle isn't in some way misrepresenting where they're at in the course at that point, which can happen if they are doing pretty poorly in their quizzes. All right, so that is how we would set up that inside of a category. Other things of importance inside of a category, actually that's the main thing, is if you want to drop the lowest. So now at this point, one of these will drop, only 4 of these will count. I've used a category to organize my quizzes. I've used a category to help deal with the fact that my quizzes have different point values. I use these weights to say everything is worth the same amount relative to each other. I could have done this like 20 points, 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%, but I didn't. Or I could have thought of this, well, if the whole thing's worth 50, so 12.5, 12.5, 12.5, 12.5. But that all gets really weird if you're trying to drop a lowest grade. So in that case, I just set them all to be a 1, and that tells Moodle that every one of these is worth the same relative to each other. So it will recalculate, basically, because these point values are different here, in order to make this worth the same relative to that. And then in that case, when you drop one, it's fine. It doesn't make any difference whatsoever. It is important, if your quizzes are worth different amounts relative to each other, or your items inside of a category are worth different amounts relative to each other, then doing drop one or keep highest can really mess things up. So you don't want to do that. The drop lowest and keep highest make the most sense when every item in a category is worth the same relative to the other items. So those are the 2 primary reasons to use categories: organization and dropping lowest grades.